Involved with the church?
Well, let me think. When I was a child in Northcote, we went to the Methodist Sunday school. Um, yes, that sticks in my mind from the little thingy, black thingy that we used to put a penny in, and someone used to push a button, and that was a penny for the black babies. Excuse me. Then when we moved to Hamilton, it didn't. My nana died, and things didn't settle quite like they were. And then when I met my first husband, he was a Catholic, much to Dad's horror. And after we married, I became a Catholic and was involved there, all the way through into Tauranga. And then after he left, I went into limbo for a while until I met my second husband, and he came from a very strict Presbyterian family. So I'm a bit ecumenical. I became involved there. I played the organ. I cleaned and did the flowers and did the newsletter. And then after that marriage sort of disintegrated, I again went into limbo until someone persuaded me to do an alpha course at St. Peter's, and the vicar persuaded me to stay. So now I'm very much involved there. Have been since about 2000.
What were your first experiences of music? I mean, you sing, you played the organ.
Yes.
So where did you learn all this?
My mother would say in the womb. My father's best man was the piano player in a dance band. And when Mum was expecting me, he'd come and play the piano for hours for her. So she said it was born in me. My nana played the piano and used to help me a little bit. And then Uncle Wally, as we called him, started teaching me. And eventually I moved to a music teacher in Northcote. Then when we moved to Hamilton, Dad had an elderly gentleman, Mr. Whitehead, who taught piano. And he used to come to teach me. Don't think he taught me much in the way of theory or anything like that. But between him and Dad and Mayer's Musical Centre, they bought me masses and masses of music. I've got cupboards and boxes full of music that they bought me. And I think I was fortunate in that I was a good sight reader of music. So I was able to play all kinds of things, Robin's Return, the Rustle of Spring, all those glitzy things which my dad liked. I don't think I sang much, especially not at school. I wasn't involved in the choirs and that. It wasn't until I came to Tauranga and was at St. Mary's that I started singing with the church choir and playing the organ there. But it was mainly when I came out here to Katikati, to the Presbyterian Church. Alan Yeoman had a choir there called the Lyric Singers, and I joined that. And that was a really good time. But then it was 1995 that I discovered barbershop singing, and there was a women's chorus down in Tauranga, Coastal Harmony, and I joined that, and that opened up my whole life to singing and to travel and to friendship. When I came here, I'd always played the piano. My son was just saying the other night he remembers as a child me playing the piano as he and Andrea, my daughter, went to bed at night time. So they always had that music. Playing the organ, Freda Johnson taught me how to master the organ, and I've just I'm not brilliant, but I've just sort of gone on from there.
I want to hear more about this travel with the singing and the group. I know we're jumping around here, Sam, but can you keep up with us?
Okay. Barbershop, Sweet Adelines. It's an American art form of singing. It's not just, standing around singing. We trained for it. The first workshop I went to, they explained that barbershop singing is like a piece of cake. You get your bass, the cakey bass, that's the bass singers. And let me tell you, women's voices, bass singers, have got a beautiful depth. Then you get the cake, which is the lead, and they're singing the tune. And then on top of that, you get the icing, which is the tenor. And barbershop tenors have a really true bell-like. They're not like these screechy sopranos. But then the baritone is the sticky goo which holds it all together. And I was a baritone. And it was just such a joy to have that harmony. And we did a lot of training. We went away on training workshops. We had coaches come from America. There was choreography too, because, excuse me, it wasn't just standing static. You sort of had movement, and you had makeup and costumes. So eyeshadow and false eyelashes, red fingernails and lips to match, glitter in the hair, glittery costumes. It was right up my alley. I could show off. Well, first time, we used to have annual national contests, and that was Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington. And so we sang there, we stayed in hotels, we travelled together, we sang in airports, on street corners and all the rest of it. First time we went away was to Australia, to Melbourne, and we were going to sing with the Melbourne chorus. But we all got sick and only one of us ended up on stage. Then in 2000, a group of us from Tauranga went with the Auckland chorus as supporters to Orlando. So we supported that, and when you hear 7,000 women's voices singing in barbershop harmony, your hair stands on end. It was absolutely amazing. And some of those American women, boy, could they sing.
Gave me the shivers right there.
Yes, and then we went to, as I said, Detroit in 2006, but I was part of the chorus then, and that was a different experience again.
And that's where you got your show-off jacket.
Yes, yes.
That you're wearing right now.
Yes, definitely.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yes, no. It was a wonderful lifestyle in many ways. A lot of women friends. We travelled together. I was in 2 quartets. We just sang everywhere. If there were 4 women with the 4 parts, you sang.
Beautiful.
It was. It is.
Now we've jumped around a bit here, but it doesn't matter. So we're going to talk now about meeting members of the opposite sex, and were there any organised social events, and when and where did you meet your first husband? So we're going to talk about meeting members of the opposite sex and all that growing up through that period.
Well, they were just all around boys, weren't they? At Hamilton West, I don't know how it happened, there was a group of us 4 girls, and somehow or other, these 4 boys from Witiora School, over the other side of the town, used to appear at the fence at lunchtime, and we got chatting. We nearly got kicked out of school for that. And then at school, you just rode home with them. Eventually, my dad let me go to the YMCA dances, but apart from that, no, they just were around.
So where did you meet your first husband?
Oh, well, the youngest one friend of our small girls group had always wanted to go out with Bernie, who was the bad boy. He wasn't really bad, but he just was rather naughty looking and a bit quirky. She'd always wanted to go out with him and she'd never got the chance. But excuse me, here we were, 16 or so, and the opportunity came. So she asked me if I'd go with her on a blind date.
Okay.
So this day she decided that she and I would go and meet Bernie. So here we were, 2 prim 16-year-olds on our push bikes, up to the lake, the Hamilton Lake, and there were these 3 guys on motorbikes. There was Bernie, still with his quirky smile and, you know, that wicked look in his eye, and Gary, tall and curly-headed, and there was what's his name, Dean, that film star, look-alike. Sweep of dark, James Dean, and a white silk scarf on his big Tiger 500. So that was Malcolm. Next day he turned up at my place to invite me to go to his 21st out at Whotawhata. And Dad was absolutely appalled. Not only was he on a motorbike, he was a Catholic, and he was a fireman on the railway, ex-Navy. Anyway, I went, and that was the start. A year later, Dad said, "You know how I feel, that you do what you think's best." We became engaged. And then a year later, we married. Again, Dad said, "You made your bed, you lie on it." He gave me away and stopped speaking to me for 6 years. So that was a bit tough. It was very tough, but never mind.
Was that
Unfortunately,
because you were pregnant?
yes.
Talk about that. That's fun.
Yes. That was unfortunate, but it did happen.
It was very common.
It was quite common, and we had been engaged for a year and planning to marry. Unfortunately, I lost that baby within a couple of months. So, but we went on and had another child in 1958, Paul, but he died at birth. And then Andrea was born in 64, and Stephen in 66, and Claire in 69. But she was spina bifida and didn't last long. And then there were a few miscarriages in between too.
So you had difficult childhood years.
I did, yes.
It does put a strain on the marriage.
Well, not only that, my husband had his own problems, I think. The family had a lot of mental problems and instability he was the second oldest of 7, and he left the Navy because he had a bedwetting problem. And then he started drinking, and his drinking caused a lot of problems. He had a spell in jail for drink driving, and he got a bit violent with it too. So yes, but then eventually he toddled off with somebody else who used to ring me up and say, "How do I stop him hitting me?" So, and yes, it was a waste of a lot of talent. He was a very talented young man in many ways, but yeah, all his fears, I think, got in the way of him. So he committed suicide in 1977.
Obviously a very troubled man.
Very, very troubled man, yes.
And your second marriage?
Oh, well, I'd been quite happily working at Otamotai College by that time, and my friends decided I needed to get out and meet people. I didn't think I needed to, but anyway, they persuaded me to go to this club called the Good Companions, and it was for single people, widowed, divorced, unmarried. And I got the rush the first night because I was a new girl on the block. And I didn't particularly like that, so I didn't go back for another couple of months. And I met Colin. He was a farmer from Katikati, bright blue eyes, ruddy cheeks, white hair, a sturdy build. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He was a scoutmaster. He was an elder in the Presbyterian Church, and he made me feel safe. Blow me down if he didn't turn up the next day too. My sister and her husband were there, and he invited me out on the following Monday night. My sister was absolutely appalled, but I said yes, I'd go. That date was to the ladies' night of the Rotary Club out at Katikati. So I think I caused a bit of a story. I remember I wore a dress that was all lemon and apricot flowers and was just above the knee. In those days, I dyed my hair, and it was a sort of an auburn colour. And I remember one of the guys saying behind my back, "Hey, Coop, where did you find that?" So that was the beginning of it. He was always on my doorstep when I came home from school. He had a contracting business with the council, mowing the grass verges over the whole district. So he was often there. So he would take us out to the farm, to his people out there, and that was the way it went for the next 2 or 3 years. I'd go out and stay with his mum and dad. The kids would be down in the farm with him. I learned a huge amount about Katikati and its background, and eventually we married, and I came to live here in 1975.
Your children were growing up by
No, my children were only little. Stephen was, how old was he? He was about 9, and Andrea was 11. I think it was very hard for them too. Colin had 2 children. Diane was about 13 and Jim was about 16, I think. The kids adored Diane, they got on really well, but Jim was a bit because he and his father had rubbed along very nicely by themselves. They didn't really need us. And there's still sort of a bit of a distance between us and
Do your children live in Katikati?
my children, no. Now, Stephen lives in Auckland and Andrea lives in Hamilton now. So
Not too far away.
no, not too far. No.
Grandchildren?
I have 3. Andrea has 2 boys. Dallas is 28. Lucas is 22. I think there's 6 years between them anyway. They're part Maori, good-looking boys. Dallas looks a little bit like James Rolliston, and Lucas has hair down his back, which he puts up in a big knot. He wears dark-rimmed glasses, and with a little beard, give him a gun, he'd look like an Israeli terrorist. He's just ceased his education at university in media studies to go and work for Pack and Save, which he quite enjoys if it wasn't for the customers. Now, Stephen has a boy, Harvey. He's 22 or 23, I can't remember now. He's just qualified with honours in engineering and does designing medical software. Now, the 3 of them used to come and stay with me, and I used to call them my coffee and cream, because Andrea's boys were part Maori and Harvey was blue-eyed and blonde. And they were the darlings of my heart. We used to have a lot of fun. We'd go places, we'd go swim, we'd go to the movies. I took them down to Wellington once. We flew down, went to the museum and did all kinds of things and came back on the train. Now, Andrea's boys had never done that kind of thing, but Harvey's much more lucky, I suppose you'd say, in that he has been to France with his father and to Tahiti and has flown and has had a different lifestyle. So, but no, yeah, great.
Bet they love coming to Grandma though.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're going to talk about your time, Katikati history time,
Yes.
in a bit of a timeline. We've talked about your relationship with Katikati and when it did begin, and then you started with the council.
Council, yes.
You started in about 1975?
No, I came to Katikati in 1975 and I was still working down at Otamoto College then.
Right.
And my parents-in-law didn't like it. I wasn't part of the community, and Colin had said to me that I wasn't to be a drone, I was to be involved. So after a year or so, I went to work as the bank manager's secretary at the Bank of New Zealand and absolutely hated it. And then I went to the dairy company. It was just a typist down there batching stuff for the computer. But sometime around then, I'd become secretary to the Scout group, which Colin was part of. And Dave Hume, who was the chairman of the community board, he was related somehow too, had prevailed upon me to become secretary to the community board. So that was about 1977, I suppose. I was secretary to the community board. And then the job at the council agency office became vacant as Ratu Gilfillan was leaving to be married. She was an older woman, but that was a lovely thing to happen. And so council suggested I should apply for the job. So of course I got it and I became the council agency clerk. Now that was in where the art gallery is in there now. And that was a good job. You did the rates, you did the dogs, you did the power accounts, and you also did the driving licences. But the library was there. And that was run by a voluntary committee which had been in place since 1879. Not the same people, of course, but they let me take over. So that
and
was,
you loved
and
it.
I loved it. Yes.
Now tell me about this. I mean, but first of all, before we go into the library, you've held many positions in Katikati and you still do. You're
Yeah.
a JP.
Yes, I became a JP in 1984. That was because Uni Cull, who'd been the previous secretary of the community board too, decided to retire and he didn't want to do any of this anymore. Again, Dave Hume had a finger in the pie. I was working in the library. I was central. I was in town. So they decided they needed somebody where people could get at them. So Bruce Townsend interviewed me and I became a JP.
And you're a ward councillor?
No.
Not a ward councillor.
No, Colin wouldn't let me. No, the council wouldn't let me. Somebody nominated me once to stand for council, and council very kindly said quietly, we don't think it's a good idea with you working for us. So I didn't become a councillor, but I was secretary to the Scouts, to the Federated Farmers. Nancy Merriman bought Business and Professional Women, and we had a big thing there. I instigated the tertiary study for girls, which is still going. Dave Eddy objected because it was sexist, it was just for girls. What else have I been part of? Oh, Pakeke Lions, I've been Pakeke Lions, I've been on the vestry for the church. Whenever anybody wanted a secretary, it seemed to be me.
Well, you had the skills.
Oh, yes, yes.